birthday to 1984. It's turning 73. George Orwell must be so proud in his grave. So let's put this down and get started. I'm not gonna put this down. This I love. Orwell wrote this book 2 years before his death. Before Orwell died, he said that this book is not an attack on any particular government at that time, but rather it's an attack on ourselves. He says, "The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you." There are 3 things that I really want to delve in today. First of all is why and when I decided to read this book. Second thing is a review of the book, very brief, don't worry. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is whether or not we are developing totalitarian tendencies in our modern day Western societies. And I think it's very important and pertinent to talk about this today. So the story of how I started reading this book is that I read 1984 in 9th grade like many of my American counterparts throughout the country. It haunted me when I did. It was so scary. The idea of animals hurting each other and talking was to me completely different than the counterparts that we grew up reading, which are like, you know, the fairy tales, fables where animals are cute, compassionate, wise, and this book was nothing like that. And so I never wanted to read anything else by George Orwell. But when I was at Salvation Army just a couple weeks ago, I saw 1984 and there was a beautiful copy of the book. Look at this thing. It's got a bookmark and everything in the pages are so thick and gorgeous. And once I brought it home, I picked it up, started reading, and honestly could not put it down. Winston's story is epic. It's just, you know what's gonna happen at the end. We've been told that the thought police takes over and kills and shoots and rebrands every person towards the end of his life. You just don't know when and how. And we watch Winston, who's an intelligent, thoughtful man, which is everything that the society at the time doesn't want him to be, fall to his knees. And I absolutely adored this. Like, I was obsessed. Obsessed is my favorite word. Anyways, I was obsessed, could not put it down, and I was so happy that I started. So what do I think about this book? Let's get into my review. So thank God, when I thought I was going to read this dystopian novel, like usually people read dystopians, especially these days, because we feel like it has something to say about our particular society. And upon starting this book, I was like, okay, we don't have Big Brother at every corner, thank God. We don't live in like this kind of totalitarian regime like in 1984. I was really like relieved, but we are giving away, willfully giving away our own freedoms today, and that is a warning that Orwell mentioned when in an interview before his death. And I think that's what scared me so much about this book and what kept me reading. It's like, in this novel in 1984, they're forced to keep their expressions, their thoughts all in check because anything can give them away. Your friend can snitch on you, your kids can snitch on you, your kids might have you killed. And that to me was like, whoa, what is this? But you know, we're not that far away from that. Like, I know like my friends in UK and stuff were like, they were fined if they were seen like crossing into their mom's house or another family member's house because you weren't supposed to see anybody during the quarantine. So we are snitching on our neighbors, on our friends, and maybe even to our on our families. And I find that fascinating and like in a disgusting way fascinating, you know? And today we're so scared of microchips being put into our vaccines. But honestly, we willfully go with our free will. We go to the Apple store and buy an iPhone and happily give our data away. But we do willfully give away our information, our tracking locations. We allow apps to know exactly where we are. We forget to turn off our geolocation on Snapchat. We can track each other all the time. And that's just, I'm just talking about GPS tracking. There's so much data that we give away about ourselves that marketing companies have profiles of us waiting for us to succumb to their marketing. We also have Alexa. She didn't hear me. Amazing. Maybe she isn't listening, but you know what? She probably is. And I always see like Alexa's like flickering and she hears every conversation I have with my husband, and I'm sure she hears every conversation you guys have. And our phones, Siri I don't want to say her name again because she'll talk. She probably will talk. They all are listening to everything, and we're okay with that. We really are. But the problem becomes when we are not just using our purchasing power, but using our thoughts, and those are controlled. Political parties put out ads all the time. For example, I've been seeing pro-choice ads everywhere and pro-life ads everywhere. So pro-life ads, they use emotion, a picture of a baby, to manipulate us. Whereas pro-choice ads are usually using the idea of a woman's autonomy and the fact that our society wants to control us, also succumbing to our emotions and manipulating our emotions to get the result that somebody else has or wants us to have. And I think that's problematic because, for example, I believe in abortion being okay, and go ahead and do that. But if you are very religious, very conservative, go ahead, don't abort your child. It's fine. I'm not going to judge you, and you shouldn't judge my choice either. But that rationality is taken away, and emotion, rage, anger, idiocy, these kind of emotions come to play because we're manipulated. When we see these ads, we get an emotional reaction, and that's what marketing for these ideologies does to us. It's crazy. Furthermore, Google is controlling our political beliefs online, censoring things on Facebook, not just from the right, but the left. And they're censoring political ideologies. When the Israel-Palestinian war was happening just 2 weeks ago, people were so upset that the Palestinian voices were not being heard on Instagram because any news of the Palestinians and from the Palestinians was being labeled as misleading information, even though it's coming straight from the field. And what this does is it creates the othering of people, the othering of pro-choice, the othering of pro-life, the othering of Palestinians, the othering of LGBTQIA plus people, the othering of any group of people that diverge from the majority, from what is okay online, that the social media population has said is okay. Now, there are so many beneficial ideas that we do get from social media. For example, the Egyptian revolution happened with the power of social media. A dictator was thrown over, which is chef's kiss, amazing, innovative, beautiful. And as well, I think the LGBTQIA plus community, before it was LGBTQ, that was it. That was the acronym that I knew of, that many people knew of. And as people's identities change, we get to learn about different types of orientations, different types of gender pronouns, what to use, what not to use, and we get to confer dignity upon different groups of people based on what they are asking us to do online. And this is a beautiful, non-harmful way of using social media, and I think it's amazing. Now, there are other things that do not confer dignity, which is people getting labeled anti-LGBTQIA+, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, or against Black people without having a cohesive look at that person. For example, a person might just be a disrespectful idiot who just hasn't been raised well, hasn't been raised as well as us to confer dignity upon other people. And it just, this poor idiot, that's just, we should feel bad for this idiot, but instead we cancel that person, we take away his voice and take away the opportunity for him or her or them to learn and grow, and that is cancel culture, and that's essentially the opposite of conferring dignity. Now, there are some people that deserve to be canceled, in my opinion, but see, again, it's so arbitrary. I'm not a judge. I'm nobody. You're nobody. And together we are somebody, and we have an effect. And I think my point here is we have to be conscientious of creating a majority so large that other opinions are not heard. And because of this, we're so okay with politicians like Biden coming up and saying, I'm going to stop Hispanic hate. I am so pro-Muslim. And we're just okay with these blanket statements. We don't look further in the actions because at the surface level, this person has said, I love this group of people. This person might be okay to vote for. And our culture of toxic cancel culture has created these kind of labels where people can falsely market themselves as, I'm not racist, I'm anti-racist, I'm just a cut above the rest, when honestly that person just wants power or gain. It's just another marketing ploy. So because of the many amount of voices on social media, our sense of understanding has become befuddled, and we have become the ministry of truth ourselves. We've become the thought police, and that's scary. So what does this novel mean for us? Are we seeing totalitarian tendencies coming up in the Western society just like Orwell feared? This is the warning that's in the book, that we might flash forward to a world where we are the thought police. And I think we're very close to that. We are voluntarily giving up our freedoms for the freedom of press, speech, and thought. So what I'm about to say now is very controversial. These are the kind of opinions that are not allowed online in our thought police kind of society that's going on online. It's just not okay to talk about these things because we have silenced these kind of opinions, even though there may be a lot more there than we think might be. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the Black Lives Matter's protests. I was listening recently to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, and he was talking about how we weren't allowed to talk about the degree of risk involved with the work of the police officers. That when they're making cutthroat decisions at the moment, that the degree of risk and arbitrariness with their job is so much higher than we give them credit for. And therefore, the degree of risk increases the arbitrariness in which to use physical violence and force for the police officers. And that does have something to do with the conversation. Black lives are important to Malcolm Gladwell, but he says that we also, in this conversation of reforming the police officers, we have to talk about the degree of risk, because that is something in their favor, not for killing, of course, but for the misappropriation of force. And of course, misappropriation of force is a huge societal problem in the United States, huge. But the degree of risk needs to be talked about to have a 360 view of the problem and to analyze it in a way that's not controlled by us, people on the social media, and more so controlled by academics who have a better view of analyzing the situation and fixing the situation. Now, here's something that I actually agree with, and I think that this also has to do with the fabrication of facts and history that goes on in the novel, but it's also going on in our daily lives. For example, Canada just found out that 213 students were murdered, but the headlines that we got was that 213 Indigenous children were found dead in Canada. That's not appropriate. We know who killed them. We know who murdered them. This is just bias. Now, the second headlines, like I mentioned again, like a couple weeks ago, the Israel-Palestine war was happening, and which started at the end of the holy month of Ramadan. And my God, the New York Times and other headlines were so biased. They were like, 2 Israeli children killed by Hamas. On the other hand, it was like 71 Palestinian children were killed. By who? Exactly. Why aren't you telling me who? Why are you so why are you using the passive voice? Use the active voice. We're supposed to be using active voice in journalism. People aren't just found dead, they are killed. You are not a slave, you were enslaved. These kind of things are important to a conversation. And social media has been highlighting these aspects, and these are the good conversation starters. But like I mentioned, this free speech was curtailed not just by the news, but by Instagram itself, who's like, okay, wait. Posting something like this is not factually correct, so we're going to stop these stories and ban these accounts. And it's happening. Instagram is powerful. People had to start new accounts. It was crazy. Now, the elephant in the room, cancel culture. Ugh, I hate cancel culture to pieces. There are people who deserve to be canceled, like Harvey Weinstein, whose crimes are factually proven in a court of law. But we as a people are using ourselves as police. It's almost like hate week, in 1984 there's like hate week, everyone's screaming at pictures on the telescreens, we're becoming that sort of people. We see a picture of a person and we just start screaming and we start yelling and we silence other people's opinions without hearing their story. And it produces this conformity that stifles conversations. It's insane. And the pressure that this creates is greater than any pressure from a state political party. We ourselves are the thought police and thought policing each other. People are forced to apologize for things they may have done as teenagers, even though we don't even know if they're evolved as a person, if they now are anti-racist, if they are pro-Muslims, if they are pro-Jewish people. We don't even know what their current stance is. But maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they said something that is held inappropriate to today's moral standards. Is that okay? I mentioned someone like Harvey Weinstein, who is completely misogynistic, and it's proven in a court of law. It's a completely different thing. And a lot of people are losing their jobs because of cancel culture, and we don't even feel remorseful because in many cases these people are successful or affluent people. Either they have power or money, so we don't feel morally obliged to care about that person. And it's a form of virtual lynching, a virtual form of hate week, as I mentioned. And there are viral videos that do not share the whole story. The most dramatic one that I remember that personally experiencing last year was that in Michigan, and I'm from Michigan, in my local area, a video was shared about this Black mother and daughter, and they were faced with a white woman who pulled a gun on them. And I was outraged when I saw it, but I did some more digging and I found the complete video, which was 10 times longer on YouTube than it was being shared on Instagram. And in this video, the mother and daughter, the Black mother and daughter, were entering a fast food restaurant when they were jostled by a white woman. So this white woman jostled them. She was very rude, inappropriate, but the mother and daughter started screaming and saying, "You're racist, that's why you jostled us." Some people just jostle because they're rude, and it was pretty evident this woman was just a rude, obnoxious lady. She started yelling at them when they started yelling at her, and they're both yelling at each other. And the white woman's husband comes to de-escalate the situation, and the Black mother-daughter are still yelling, "Wait, like, you guys are racist." And so the white couple, they get scared and they go into their car. And the Black mother comes and shoves the car as it's backing up. And frenzied, the white lady runs, like she's kind of mad, like, "You're not supposed to do this." She comes out of the car with her gun. But that was the only part that we saw. So this was an escalation between private people for ridiculous reasons, and the video shows how everyone in this fight was wrong to different degrees, but it was framed as just a racist issue. Look how racist people are. They're pulling a gun on a Black mother and daughter duo, and we were all emotionally manipulated without seeing the whole story. Once you see the whole story, you know you can't judge if this was a case of racism or not. It's just not there. And that's what social media does. That woman was harassed. The woman who took out the gun, later her life was kind of over in Michigan. People identified her, started stalking her. It was ridiculous. People were livid, and very few people went online to see the whole video. And that's what cancel culture is becoming. It's taking away the truth of the whole picture. Sometimes we need to zoom out, and social media gives us snippets. Okay, in this war, this person hit this person, and that's why we need to boycott this person. That's what we're becoming. We're boycotting people, ideas, philosophies, and stifling voices, and that is toxic for the future. And the last thing I want to talk about in this topic is that US politics use rhetoric, social media, to manipulate all of us. And they know our psychology, they know we're idiots. They know we're gonna post half-baked stories online. Trump used this with fake news. The anti-vaxxers are using this, using unauthoritative videos and news and articles, people posing to be doctors, people posing to be intellectuals in this subject of mRNA vaccines to misguide the people. A lot of this has to do with religion and other issues that are fueling these ideas, and people's anxieties are just rising to a high, which is creating more and more of this misinformation. The left especially loves to use cancel culture to keep its agenda moving forward, and the right, like we know, is still using Trump's fake news ideology to push its rhetoric forward. Anything that doesn't conform to their views is fake news. And the fact that we allowed Trump to come to office with his whole rhetoric is that we don't care for truth. We care about ideas, emotions that are expressed, and that's the genius of Trump, that he's able to manipulate emotion to get his political outcomes done. He wasn't successful in the other round because there were too many voices that were against him. This time around, a lot more people came out to vote. This is why the right is trying to suppress the votes as well. So what can we learn? Are we really going towards a totalitarian regime? No. But we are silencing ourselves, giving away our freedoms. And it depends on us, like Orwell said. It really depends on us. And we have the power to hear opinions, to do research. There are too many voices speaking on social media. We have to be very careful. Our moms and dads are sharing information on WhatsApp and not checking the authority of this information. We're living in really tough times where we are censoring ourselves. We're becoming a majority instead of many voices coming together. There will always be voices that we don't like heard, but we need to keep on hearing them and not silencing them for a very healthy world. And I think the problem is that there's a lot of hard nationalism all around the world, especially in Western countries. Nationalism is growing, and we have way too many voices saying things that don't have any authoritative basis on them. Authority is disappearing on many subjects of science, climate change, abortion care, religious issues for every religion without sources. People are creating convoluted versions of their religion that doesn't stick with the idea of love that is the heart and center of every religion. People are forgetting their essence and why they practice a religion in the first place, for peace, for unity, for love. People are forgetting why we fight for our rights, why we fight for our rights as women, as Black people, as people of color, as LGBTQIA plus people, as people with disabilities, whatever the case is, people from third world countries. All these people, we are fighting for recognitions, but that does not mean that we silence the voices. And people on the other end, people on the right spectrum, the hard nationalists, stop trying to silence everybody else. We don't want silence. We want all the voices balancing each other, understanding, no hardness. And I think the beauty of America a couple hundred years ago is that we didn't have two parties. We had many political parties, and people didn't try to silence the way they do today. Freedom of speech and thought is the most beautiful thing about my country, the US, and I would never want it to get hurt in any way possible. And I'm gonna share a story that is very hurtful to me and hits a soft spot, but it just illustrates what I want to say. So a couple of years ago, as you guys know, the Charlie Hebdo paper in Paris, they produced a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which was disrespectful, and it did hurt my feelings so much, and it was just hard for me to look at. And because of this, a terrorist group decided to terrorize and bomb, and I forgot what it was, a stabbing or bombing of the offices of Charlie Hebdo. And what these terrorists did was they tried to silence the voices of the freedom of press. Yes, it was hurtful to people who practice a religion, but when we act in ways of violence, whether it's cancel culture or terrorist kind of violence, what we are doing is essentially silencing freedom of thought and press. I don't like that caricature that they made, but if I was a subscriber to Charlie Hebdo or I saw this, I would have mailed them and just said, please, like, that was hurtful. Like, if you could do a pro-Muslim cartoon next time, like, that would be really appreciated. Whatever, you know, like, in a more sane manner. And when we try to literally and metaphorically bomb truth, not truth, this wasn't truth, I think it was more an opinion. If we try to stifle an opinion in whatever way possible, we create more harm. We create more tragedies. We create more totalitarianism. And though there are voices you will never like being heard, we just got to see the whole picture and keep on moving forward and stay calm and keep on moving forward. So here is a blow to freedom and a celebration of the freedom of speech and freedom of thought. May we never succumb to totalitarianism and to George Orwell's nightmare world of 1984.